we going to live stream?
Yep, we are live streaming right now. It's going to turn on soon. Just give me 1 second.
I had the YouTube.
All right. Okay, guys, we are on. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have an exciting show today for you. We've got Sai Soundraj from Floyd. Okay, guys, we are on. Sorry.
That is from me because I was checking the YouTube. Live stream. It's working.
Yeah. Okay, great. Sorry about that. We've got Sai Soundraj from Floyd Hub, one of the leading players in terms of helping to democratize deep learning. The best way to describe Floyd Hub, as many of you guys know, is they're essentially Heroku for deep learning, right? Making it very easy for people to kind of spin up machines and do training and things like that. I don't know, I'll put words in Sai. I'll turn it over and let him describe the company and himself. Maybe a good way to start, Sai, is to describe your background and the founding team's background.
Cool, yeah. Hey guys, good to be here. Thanks for having me. Again, like Arthur said, Whitehead said, my name is Sai. I'm CEO at Floyd Hub. Again, what we do is we are building a platform for AI and deep learning. And by means of analogies, one thing we've found that sticks well is we are a Heroku for deep learning. Sort of the way Heroku made deploying web applications really, really simple by eliminating all the DevOps and engineering hassles, we do the same thing for training and deploying your deep learning models. We eliminate the engineering, infrastructure, and DevOps hassles. So, as data scientists, you can focus on the core of the problem rather than having to worry about where do I provision GPUs, how do I maintain them, how do I install these drivers, how do I scale them, and all these things. So, as for me, we started this about a year and a half ago, earlier last year. Before that, I worked at Microsoft for 6 years, where I led a few deep learning research efforts in Bing and Cortana. So a lot of these problems have been recurring during my time there. We did a lot of NLP deep learning research. Prior to that, from 2000, in the late 2008 to 10, I was at Stanford. I was in the AI lab there. Andrew Ng, the luminary Andrew Ng, he was my advisor. So we were doing a lot of what was back then called neural networks, what's today called deep learning. We were doing using neural networks for a lot of robotics applications, autonomous helicopters, humanoids. For some reason, humanoids were really popular in 2008 and 9. So that's kind of in the AI lab is when a lot of when I started working on neural networks and deep learning. So I've been working in this space for almost a decade now. And what we're solving now are problems that have kept surfacing over and over again. For the longest time, waiting for someone else to solve this. Turns out no one really jumped in. The space is also very nascent. It's what I would call the ice age of AI. So there's a lot of growing pains that we were trying to solve in Floyd Hub.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you've got the right background, throughout your years with at Stanford and Microsoft. What was, as you guys thought about this company in the early days, a year and a half ago, what was the main problems that you guys were looking to solve primarily?
So this didn't start out as a startup idea per se. Like I said, I was still working at Microsoft in late 2015, 16, when I ended up having a bunch of servers, deep learning servers that I hosted for our entire team inside my office, which is a pretty bad idea because I was in Seattle and it really heats up the office. So in November, everyone would come and bundled up, and I would be in my shots because I knew I had like 8 GPUs, and it was just fogging up the office. But anyway, so I had these things, and a few years ago, before TensorFlow was as popular as it is today. It was Theano, Cafe, and there was a lot of instability in the ecosystem, both hardware and software. Right? NVIDIA would release a new version of drivers, and that would break the latest installation of TensorFlow, of Theano, or vice versa. Right?
Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yep. So, since I had all these servers in my office, then people in my team would come to me and be like, hey, this thing doesn't work, this doesn't work. So I was kind of getting frustrated at some point. So I created this GitHub repository. It's called DL Setup. It's just a bunch of instructions on how to set up all the possible deep learning frameworks. I just created it so people wouldn't really be bugging me about these things. And turns out someone posted that on Hacker News earlier last year, and it grew really, really popular. It was a huge discussion around this. And that was kind of the first time I realized, hey, it's not just me and my team having problems around the engineering side of deep learning. A lot of people are. Traditionally, there's this split between data scientists and deep learning. There's a separation of concerns. Data scientists assume things should just work. Like I install a library and I do TensorFlow.train or Theano.trainer should work. But in reality, things are not as simple. Right? So yeah, when this whole thread was focused around the engineering hassles behind deep learning, machine learning, and data science in general, and that was the first time I was like, oh, this, I face these problems. A lot of people are facing these problems. How do we go about doing that, right? I've faced similar issues when developing websites. This was a long time ago, but that's when Heroku kind of swooped in and made it magical, right? I would spend an entire day trying to set something up, and Heroku would just make it happen in like less than 10 minutes. So that was sort of the inspiration around why we started. And even then, it was not really clear in the beginning. It just seemed like a really good idea. But over time, this seemed like a problem that definitely needs a solution.
May I ask a couple of questions here?
Sure, yeah.
Sai, you seem to be a very technical person, so maybe my questions will link on the technical side as well. You mind?
No, absolutely not, Albert. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a pleasure to talk with you. And
likewise.
So I look at Floyd Hub, and its popularity within our group is tremendous. Everyone was saying Floyd Hub. If you want to use, if you want to do deep learning and you want a cloud solutions, Floyd Hub. And so out of curiosity, I went to see on the site. So the first thing for a guy like me is the price is cheaper, so I love it. Now, so let me ask you this. Developer, one obvious choice for me to use a cloud solutions will be AWS, right?
Yeah.
How would you differentiate Floyd Hub from a solution such as AWS? What do you see the kind of the border divide between using an AWS instance, which for a lot of audience here, which means a pre-prepared instances for an AWS instance, versus using a Floyd Hub solution? Will you do you think that's a clear question?
No, absolutely. That's a great question, right? So the way I think about this is AWS is a bare-bone infrastructure as a service, right? When you go provision a GPU, they give you a GPU. That's pretty much it. Yeah, sure, you can install an AMI, and there's a few open source AMIs that come up with some pre-installed libraries. But even then, it's pretty bare bones, right? What we offer is we build a lot of tooling and services on top of this. We offer an AI platform rather than bare bones infrastructure, right? I'll explain a little bit about what we offer that AWS doesn't today. But by means of a high-level analogy, it's like let's see, if AWS is like Intel motherboards, we are building a laptop, right? We need infrastructure, we need GPUs to be able to operate, but we build a lot on top of that. And GPUs by themselves are not very useful for the average or even the above average user, right? So that's one. Second thing, I'm assuming since given your expertise, you've spun up AWS instances and used them there. So let me ask you, how easy was that? Like,
you need to have fairly good expertise. You have to understand SSH keys and all these kind of more difficult concepts.
Yes.
It's not entirely. It took me a while to figure it out, and I'm fairly experienced. So
yes.
The proper answer.
Yes. So that tends to come up over and over again, right? And I'm still talking about how we started out, right? We've built a lot of stuff since we started out, but I think talking about the genesis is still useful when comparing this thing, right? So when you want an AWS instance, you can't just spin it up right away. You need to apply for it. You need to get approved. There's a human in the loop. It takes a long time. This takes between, it could take a few hours. It could take a week. Whatnot. And like we talked about, there is this separation between data scientists and programmers. Now, you can go learn how to use AWS, install the latest NVIDIA drivers, the latest version of TensorFlow, whatever your framework of choice is. But at that point, you're starting to think a lot about engineering and DevOps. And in my experience, this is never straightforward. You want to install CUDNN and make sure your libraries are optimized to use the latest, linear algebra BLAST libraries. It takes a long time. Right?
So just for the audience, a lot of this discussion between me and Sai going on is really the details of how you actually install TensorFlow. And in real life, especially after, say, versions 0.6.1 TensorFlow, that is about half a year ago, installing TensorFlow is not just like other Python library that you install wheel, then you got TensorFlow. A lot of times, you have to make sure that your CUDA driver is correct, so you can talk with your CUDA. You have to make sure that the TensorFlow work with your CUDA, and lately with ideas such as 2DNN, that will accelerate your matrix computations and all this kind of nifty stuff, become yet another factors of installing TensorFlow. I was trying to quiz Sai about this, but he gave me such a perfect answer, which is Floyd Hub is perfect to deal with this kind of issues.
And this is only one part of it, right? The other part of it is, now I have an AWS instance. How do I get data into this, right? You have to download data. And now, I'm training a model, right? Now, what if I wanted to do hyperparameter sweeps and I want to train 10 models in parallel? Am I going to spin up 10 AWS instances? That becomes more to manage, right? And let's say I finish training 10 models. AWS instances are expensive, so you need to constantly monitor them to make sure when your job finishes, you're shutting down your instance, right? Otherwise, you're burning money. Now, how do you do that? And if I have 10 models that I've trained, I come back a day later. Now, how do I version? There's no version control. People use GitHub for versioning code. But when you're training models, you're versioning your code, your data, your parameters, your output models that you produce, your environment itself, and all this, right? How do you version them? If you have 10 models that you train, you have no way to differentiate these things. AWS doesn't offer any features to do any of this, right? The other thing is collaboration. Okay, great, I trained a model. Now, how do I share that with you, right? Just giving you the model binary is hardly sufficient. I want to, just like if I was versioning code on GitHub, I would send you my GitHub repo and you would have access to the entire thing. There's no such thing for the entire training of an entire model, which is code, data, and parameters that I described to you. There's no facility in AWS to do this. And all this still pertains only to training. Now, what if you go to serving, right? How do you serve models? If you've tried to use TensorFlow serving or TensorFlow RT, you'll realize it's extremely non-trivial to serve stuff. And again, now you're clearly going from the realm of what is considered a data scientist's work to engineering. How do I serve? How do I scale this? How do I push my model to a REST endpoint? All these are things that you can do on AWS if you spend enough time, effort, learning all these things. But this is where we come in and we make all these things single command, right? you can have an instance up and running in 10 seconds. This spins up a GPU instance, installs all your entire deep learning libraries that covers 99% of the scenarios. We'll run your code, and we make it extremely easy to mount really large data sets that so you wouldn't have to download. And you can hyperparameter sweep in parallel. We'll version everything. So at any point in time, you have exact reproducibility. You can come back and see, hey, I ran these 10 experiments. The third experiment was run with learning rate 0.1. And the exact environment, so I can reproduce this at any given point in time. I can send you a link and you have an exact, you know exactly what I did, and you can start collaborating on that. Right? And again, the serving part, single command, doing stuff. And an interesting thing is if you actually, this might be an interesting, this is just my observation. If you look at a lot of deep learning publications, conference papers, you'd notice that the authors tend to be co-located. They're either in the same university, same company, or they were doing an internship in a company. Whereas if you take software, for instance, right, Linux, you have collaborators from all around the world working together to build Linux. Right? Why do we not see that in deep AI or machine learning in general? It's because a lot of tooling like this does not exist. And these are the problems that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, that's a very sharp observation. YK, if you don't mind, let me ask.
Yeah, no, please.
So, aside, don't mind if I just try to badger you with questions because you're very interesting in a way. Because you're solving a lot of problems. You're talking about like my daily pain of working. It's joy because I work for Vochi, and Vochi does ask me to do a lot of these kind of engineering work.
Yeah, and our job is to make your job easier.
So I do have a question. I will interject, Arthur. So Arthur does have a GPU at home. Does have a albeit low end. So what would be your pitch to Arthur to convince Arthur to ditch his local GPU in his living room to use you guys? Would it be fair to say that?
Right away. I already convinced, but
yeah, would it be fair? All the things that you said just now, which is to say, like all the glue code, all the lifecycle management, all the data management, which Arthur, I think you were saying that that's your daily pain.
By the way, that has been what I've been doing daily, because that's why my next question is supposed to ask you about Python dependency. Which
okay, let's come to that. Let's answer Wykit's question first.
That's right.
Yeah, having a GPU locally is great, right? Arthur was able to afford what I'm assuming is a good grade GPU. A lot of people cannot have an upfront investment. Apart from that, right? What if Arthur? I'll just speak to Arthur in first person rather than third person. But if you wanted to tune your model, you wanted to do some hyperparameter tuning, and you wanted to run 10 jobs in parallel, because each of this job, let's say, takes a day or two to run at the least, right? If you're doing anything serious. Now, the nature of deep learning is kind of this black box. You don't know ahead of time what parameters work well for a lot of problems. So you have to experiment, right? And having a single GPU is restricting because you can only run one job at a time. GPUs are not great at parallelization, right? So are you going to sequentialize this whole process? That's where cloud comes in, right? It's the same thing. If you wanted to host your website, you could host it on your own machine. It's going to be extremely limiting. How do you share, collaborate? All these things become difficult in this field where there needs to be a lot of sharing and collaboration. There's a whole dearth of data, and that's kind of how the field itself is, right? This whole deep learning AI space is kind of a hub and spoke model. There is very few hubs where new deep learning algorithms and research is created and invented. A lot of people are spokes where they reuse a lot of stuff. Me included. I go to GitHub, clone a project, and then continue to tweak stuff from there. So the collaboration and sharing is inherently built into the way this whole space works. But given the tools around this is extremely limited, right? We are only sharing and collaborating at the code level, which is not very useful. people hardly surface the parameters that they even use to train their code. And once you train like a 6-hour model, let's say Arthur and I were working together. If you train this model on your GPU, train for like 5 or 6 days, and if I was working with you, how are we going to collaborate this if it exists on a local machine?
Yeah. So, if you want to do that, you have to share the checkpoints, and checkpoint has its own format, so it's actually not that easy to do it, I would say. But sorry, I'm trying to help you to convince me, but whatever. Yeah. I mean, let me interject a little bit. So because I was in that life cycle a lot, and I myself work on, in a way, I work on both software development, data science, as well as installing a lot of these software myself. So I totally understand the pain of it. So my title is architect, by the way.
Cool.
So and I think let's go back to your point about a lot of software you install and it covers 99% of the use cases, and I really like that. I guess one of the issues that as a users will feel as well is, let's say if you go to an AWS instance, sometimes you want to customize that instance, like adding some software on top of it. And like, for example, just talk about Python. Yeah. Suppose you're using a Python distributions, and if you want to install new things on it, as you might know, that Python, between individual packages, there are a lot of conflicts that could happen.
Yeah.
You certainly understand the pain of doing those things. How would Floyd Hub propose to solve that issues? Will you explain more on that front? Because I'm very curious about it.
For sure, absolutely. And that is why I said we offer predefined and pre-installed, we call this zero setup environments that solve 99% of the scenarios, right? And this is not just beginners. A lot of people want to use TensorFlow, and they expect a certain suite of Python packages. And we go through all these dependency hell and version conflicts so that our users don't have to, right? So this happens all the time. That said, this is a problem with the ecosystem itself, and all our environments are configurable. So we have a facility, we have multiple facilities in our system where you can actually go and install your own packages. For instance, if you spin up a Jupyter notebook using Floyd Hub, you have access to an entire GPU machine. You can go and pip install whatever packages you want. You can actually use virtual env to create your own virtual environment and install packages inside of that. And we offer terminal access. Again, 99% of the users don't use this. We have this right now. And we've also automated a bunch of stuff. Just like Python has a requirements.txt where you can put a bunch of packages and automatically be installed for you, we have support for, it's called Floyd requirements.txt. So in your code, if you have this file and have a list of Python packages that you need that are not already available, we will install it before your machine spins up. Right. So that said, this still doesn't completely solve the case where you have this one package that is bound to have version conflicts, right? That's just a problem with how the package ecosystem itself works. But if you can do it locally on your machine, you can most certainly do it on Floyd Hub. But 99, like I said, 99% of the time you don't have to because it's already there.
Right. I mean, I think that's a very valid question, especially for people who is experimenting. And so, for example, like me, from time to time, just feeling itchy, I will go to just download some reinforcement learning program and run it. Yeah, lack of better things to do, or I can't go to party or something. And as you know, that will entail you use a different sets of libraries, which is very different from the standard Contlab type of libraries. And just NumPy versions difference can cause a lot of issues. And again, for AIBL members, this is really the details that you have to go through whenever you have to install a new package in your machines. And from what I heard from you, it is while you agree that you can't solve 100% of the problems, but there seems to be a fairly good pre-prepared packages so that people can use it. And if you ask me to summarize it, and as well, there is a way to configure the Floyd Hub system in customized package, which obviously you thought about all these dependency issues when you build that system.
Yes, what you said is right. I'll add 2 points to that. One is that a lot of times, let's say you're going to run a deep reinforcement learning algorithm for something, right? Maybe balancing a stick or self-driving car, whatever, right? Most likely what you're going to do is go to GitHub, clone this project, and start. That's at least what the average user does. So once you run this and let's say you go through the pains of installing these libraries and you run this on Floyd Hub, we version everything. We version your environment, we version all the packages that you ran. So the next time you want to run the same project, your environment is safe, so it makes it a lot easier. If I want to now clone your repository, I don't have to go through the pains of installing all this because you did that, right? Whereas if I just cloned a GitHub package, a GitHub repository, then I would have to go through installing all these. So this is what I meant when I said earlier that we version your entire job, which includes environment as well, right?
That's a very strong feature. That's a very strong feature.
Thank you. So that's one. And the second thing is we are also actively improving our core set of packages too, right? So if there's a lot of users installing a certain package because it's become popular. For instance, let's say when TensorFlow Learn package came up, it was initially not there. A lot of people use it, so we installed that as part of the base package, right? And there is new deep learning frameworks, new deep learning libraries, each with its own set of dependencies coming up almost every day. So we try to keep up with them and constantly improve our base packages to again make sure we're always catering to the 99%, not just 99% of 6 months ago.
Right. For people who don't know what TF-Learn is, so TF-Learn is a little bit like Keras, but it starts from a tutorial package from GitHub hackers. He hacked up a bunch of convenience layers over TensorFlow, and it become a fairly popular layers on top of TensorFlow. And later it become part of the contrib package within the TensorFlow distribution as well. So what Sai is saying is more like, how do you? So apparently Floyd Hub also have a system that look at whether users have how much they install a certain type of package, such as TF-Learn, such as for example Keras, I would guess, and how that will affect they prepare distributions.
Yes.
I'm very impressed. I have many questions, but why can't you should ask some? I'm sorry.
Sure. No. I think those are really interesting questions, getting to the heart of the product and the pain points that Floyd Hub is solving. I've got a question on the business side. Sai, it sounds like your I might be putting words in your mouth. So question is, it sounds like you guys right now, your users are guys who are maybe small and medium-sized enterprises. That's sort of like, how do I spin out something really quickly and so that I can start working on it. When larger enterprises, when you talk to larger enterprises, which you may be talking to right now, and certainly some of a minority of our members on the AIDL group do come from large companies, biotech enterprise companies. What would you say to them just in terms of how you could appeal to the larger enterprises, where in a lot of cases, they would want an on-prem solution, on-premise solution. Is that something that you guys would think about, or do you guys think that, hey, there's really n number of reasons why you don't really need an on-prem solution?
Well, this has both a business side to it and a technical side to it. Right? from um, from a business standpoint, let's talk about the technical standpoint first, right? If you look at the AI market itself today, the AI space, um, not a lot of big enterprises have um, a full-fledged adoption of AI today. Sure, there's a lot of AI. A lot of big companies have a data science team. They have a lot of data scientists. Maybe 10% of the data scientists focus on AI. Most of them are traditional data science and machine learning, right? And obviously, I'm generalizing. There are a lot of companies that are by definition, AI, they call themselves AI-powered companies, and that might skew the distribution. But let's say an average tech company like eBay, for instance, right? eBay, Visa, MasterCard, Target, which falls under the category of enterprises, don't have dedicated AI teams. So the question there is now, are we, and the market is constantly evolving, so a year from now might be very different from what it is today. So the question there is, are we going to do we want to prematurely optimize for an industry as while it is still evolving, right? That's one side of things. It's a question I ask every day. We might offer more enterprise solutions in the near future, but I personally think the stage is still it's still in a state of flux. A lot of the users today tend to be, like you rightly mentioned, small companies and a lot of individuals, enthusiasts, practitioners, and whatnot who are in the space. And so we just decided to focus on that, just so our product does not diverge, right? And so that's one side of things. From the business side of things, there's a lot of other factors as well. A lot of people want on-prem deployments, right? Enterprises have sensitive data, so they want on-prem deployments. We need to see whether it makes sense for us, given our limited resources, whether we want to focus on doing things like that. On-prem is tricky business.
Yeah.
Once you get in there, now people are going to have the HDFS Hadoop cluster on which they want to do deep learning. Even though it's not perfectly optimized and they want to build solutions, you don't want to be overly optimizing for one scenario, even though the money there might be bigger than what we might get. So it's always a trade-off when it comes to doing this. And we also want some product maturity before we offer on-prem solutions. For one, and I'm personally super excited to see how this industry evolves, right?
Yeah.
As it evolves, more and more companies start forming dedicated AI teams where they have deep learning, I don't know what you call them, deep learners or deep learning data scientists who are focusing on either deep learning or AI in general. We might start offering more there, but I just don't think on the enterprise side of things we are there yet.
Got it. No, that's super helpful. I think, yeah, enterprise sale and deployment is a whole different beast. I think premature for you guys, but I'm glad to hear that you guys are thinking about it and kind of biding your time, right? As the dust settles. I've got one more question.
We talk to a lot of these people. In fact, what I said when you said we don't focus on enterprises. It's not entirely true because a lot of users also work in enterprise. They work in all sorts of companies, right? They're not just hobbyists who just try this at home. We have users from Uber, Airbnb, eBay, and all these Mercedes-Benz. A lot of these people use us. It's just that we don't have an enterprise plan per se, but there's a lot of people who work in big companies that use Floyd Hub for their projects.
Yeah.
It might be inside a small team, inside a big company, but they still do.
Yeah. No, that's great. This is the Dropbox and the Slack deployment strategy.
Yes. It was also Heroku's.
And Heroku's, yes. I have one other question on roadmap, just in terms of at the high level, how you guys think about sort of the value addition that you guys create, right? Your mode. Certainly a lot of the orchestration, a lot of the glue code that don't exist today or people have to write for themselves, you guys are solving a big pain point, right? But it also sounds like long-term, the other big pain point you guys could potentially solve is on the data origination side, right? From a data sharing standpoint. Because right now you talk about collaboration, but I imagine you mean by collaboration is collaboration between team members, not inter-teams, right? But you can imagine certainly potentially a marketplace for data of some sort like that, that allows people to basically say, hey, not only do we have the algorithms either off the shelf or ours, but also the data to train it with.
Yeah, no, the marketplace idea is interesting. It's something we're actively pursuing. So there is a lot of things that can be done. I mean, collaboration at all levels, right? The big data revolution of the past decade created tons of data. The problem is that this data is sprinkled all around the internet. It's very difficult to get useful, meaningful data that's clean, that's being labeled, and that's readily accessible. In the few months that we have existed, our users have uploaded several terabytes of data, right?
Wow.
And I mean, of course, today all of this data is private, but we are, like I said, we are building a community of deep learning enthusiasts, practitioners, researchers, and these people bring with themselves interesting data, interesting algorithms, interesting pre-trained models, right? And what we're building is a platform wherein we can enable sharing and collaboration of this. If it comes by ways of a marketplace, then yes. But these are things we're actively exploring. I don't want to prematurely talk about the things that might be upcoming, but these are also interesting avenues for all of us.
That's great.
So let me insert one more question here, which is I have tons of questions.
Sure, I'm happy to answer them for as long as you're happy to ask.
Because you guys are very interesting, and as I said, it seems like your service is really solving a problem that a guy like me would feel happy or live happier in our lives, And
Arthur would have more time for parties if he was using your platform.
I can go to parties without so much guilt in my head. So personally, I think that learning all these steps about the lower layers, how to install things, is good if you are by yourself at least an intermediate or expert users of Linux. But for the most part, it's really it's not that easy to get everything working. So I can give you one very painful example, which is Cognitive Toolkit from Microsoft.
Yeah.
It was TensorFlow. Probably you have to go for free packages of installation, but Cognitive Toolkit we're talking about 7 to 10 packages. And my boss thought that I really love the steps, but not really. It's rather painful. And let me go back to the question I want to ask, which is, you guys are probably talking with a lot of users on Floyd Hub, and you also understand the use cases of a lot of users. So this is more like both business and also technical questions.
Mm-hmm.
What is let's say top 3 or top 5 applications of learning, which is the most popular on Floyd Hub? And of course, we certainly hope that you don't divulge user information, but you probably have some ideas on that.
Yeah, of course. The answer here is not going to be surprising. It reflects what the AI space out there is today, right? Those tend to be the use cases on our platform as well. Of course, there's variance at small levels, but we have a lot of people doing stuff related to self-driving cars, right? Udacity has an entire course called the Self-Driving Car Engineer Nano Degree, and these are not just students per se, right? These are people who work in a lot of different companies. That's when we have some users that from Mercedes-Benz who use us, and like all these things, right? But self-driving car is a big use case. We have a bunch of neuroscientists and biologists using this for a lot of medical applications. We have some users, a lab from University of Pennsylvania that use us for tumor cell detection. And these are very impactful. I've talked to these people personally, and they fall in these are subject matter experts, right? They know they're biologists, or I don't know what the exact term is, but they are researchers in their respective fields who understand their problem space really well. They understand their data. They want They know exactly what they want to solve, but they don't really care about installing the latest version of TensorFlow and upgrading to the latest version of CUDA and whatnot, right? So we have that. Other than that, we also have a lot of fun applications like the neural style transfer, which a lot of people play around with that. I mean, it's not fun anymore. There's an entire app and called Prism and a whole company behind this, which is pretty much based on image filters and stuff. So it's not necessarily just fun, but we have a lot of these applications that you see. When you open your Twitter feed and you search for hashtag deep learning, we have all those scenarios, right? And in some sense, it reflects the popularity, the trends themselves. We see a lot more image-related stuff than NLP or text-related applications. And that's kind of how it is, because images are easier to share and they're cooler to look at, so people start applying that. But on our platform, we have a lot of people using this for real use cases. Real use cases, images are useful, but a lot of people tend to work with text. So we have a bunch of NLP applications.
Again, for the audience, Sai mentioned neural style transfer, which is, you saw all these trippy videos and images online, and how do they make? So basically, is to analyze the style difference from your reference image and your content image, and there is a fairly couple of standard way to do it through what they call grand matrix. And lately, if you look at Justin Johnson's paper, there's also using a lot of perceptual information out of the images as well. And so, and if you really want to do something that impress other people out of your office, neural style transfer is the way to go. And apparently, that is also popular on Floyd Hub as well.
Yeah, and it's a cool thing, right? You take a selfie and you want to transform your selfie to look like a Pablo Picasso painting. That's a cool application, right? And these things are easier to do with images. If you created something with text, it's kind of difficult to impress people. But the real world scenarios that we see on Floyd Hub tend to be real use cases, right? Like, for instance, oil stock price forecasting. It's not a sexy thing, but it's useful. We see a lot of applications, real world applications that happen on our platform. But these are more one-off cases rather than trends. They're interesting when we actually want to analyze what the applications are. But if you look at the overall trends, like what is the most popular use case, then they tend to be things like self-driving cars, things like image detection, and less with audio and speech these days. But that's kind of how the space itself is.
Yeah, that's very
It's
cool.
always a big space for doing audio and speech, but whether company will put their data into a cloud platform is another problem, because that is a very different landscape in that. But I'm a little bit too out there when I talk about speech recognition. I should shut up. Okay, go on.
I'm looking through the audience questions. We've got a number of them right now, and I think we've answered most of Les' question. There is one that I'm not sure if we covered, which is Les has asked, do you have many deep learning templates available? I've noticed one so far in looking at your site.
Sorry, what was the question?
The question is, do you have does Floyd Hub have many templates available? So he's looked at the site and found one so far.
Okay. Yeah. So just like we talked about briefly, this concept of marketplace and so far, we're just starting to surface these things. When we started out, it was just sort of this private workspace where everyone, we didn't really incorporate the principles of sharing and collaboration, where you have templates and people can use other people's templates. We're starting to do more like that. We'll see more things in the very near future. But we're A/B testing these things and experimenting with stuff. So yeah, there's a couple of things. Again, we haven't surfaced this, but if you look hard enough, you can find more than one template. But they'll be surfaced more in the next few weeks.
Got it. Another question from Atanas is, he wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about the pricing differential between you guys, AWS, Paperspace, Bluemix, and the like.
It's difficult to off the bat just compare pricing because again, if your MacBook is $2,000 and your Intel motherboard is $500, that's apples to orange comparison, right? So it's difficult to and each of this offers different services. Paperspace does offer GPU with some pre-installed environments, but we offer a lot more tooling on top of that. So, with the caveat that anything that I say right now is going to be apples to oranges comparison, we put a lot of effort into to be competitive around pricing because we understand that GPUs are expensive. Personally, as a deep learning practitioner, I've done this a lot. I understand the pain, right? So a lot of our engineering and technology related efforts are built around reducing the price, right? And this comes in many ways. It's not just the cost per hour of GPU. If that was your metric, we are still cheaper than AWS, much cheaper than AWS. But even a lot of cost-saving factors around that. On AWS, you pay on a per hour basis, meaning if you ran something for 15 minutes, you still pay for an entire hour. We do a per second billing. You pay exactly for what you run. On AWS, you are up to your own on managing your instance, meaning you start training something, you have to constantly keep tabs on it, so you shut down your instance after your training is done. Whereas the way we work is you submit a job, and as soon as your job is done, we shut down the instance for you. All these things accumulate a lot of cost savings in the long run, and I'm talking like an order of magnitude at least.
Got it.
And yes, bottom line is we are cheaper than using other cloud service providers.
Makes your life easier too.
Sorry, Wicked, you go on.
No.
I just try to rephrase another member's questions, which is kind of interesting in this context as well. I just look at your LinkedIn profile. Of course, I was wowed by your resume and your CV, and you yourself has been doing a lot of research at Stanford as well, and as well as Microsoft. How do you see the whole trend of deep learning right now? Do you have any thoughts about it? And in our forum, we also talk about a lot, whether deep learning is a hype and all those kind of things. And we ask a lot. We ask the same questions to a lot of our panel in the past. And so you are certainly deep into this business, and you certainly invest a lot of your own time on it. How would you tell us how you feel about when people say, okay, deep learning is a hype? How do you respond?
I definitely don't think it's a hype, even though there are certain aspects of it that make it seem like a hype, but there is a core value proposition that I think is rooted in data and applications. Right. That said, there is a lot of hype around this, and that's what all these a lot of media does. There's a lot of misunderstanding around what AI and deep learning is capable of, right? I'm sure a lot of us and users of this group don't believe that, but there's a fair amount of people out there that think AI is evil. It's going to steal all our jobs, and which might be a possibility. But there's a few people that think that AI, we're going to have killer bots like the Terminator who are going to go around shooting. That kind of stuff is hype, right? That's unfounded hype. That does exist. But in terms of the space itself, it's too early to say, too early to make long-term predictions, right? But there is a strong indication that this is going to be the future, right? And several people, like for instance Andrew Ng, has made comments, and these are people that are way above my level also, who have said that AI is the new electricity, just like how electricity revolutionized basically created the industrial revolution. AI and deep learning is going to foster the next revolution. attribution. And we are seeing real-world applications of this. This is not just some a fictional thing, right? We will have self-driving cars on the streets next year, I mean, in fact, you see them occasionally these days. But this is magical, right? There's a lot of applications today when you speak into your phone. Google Now or Siri, and it actually recognizes your voice, translates into text, and then actually understands the intent behind this. There's a lot of deep learning going on here, right? So, it's definitely not hype. And today's voice recognition accuracy is way above what it has ever been. And, in some cases, it even beats humans. No, that certainly is not hype. Right? And you see like a lot of these applications, some of them are obviously academic, they're done inside controlled environments, but you see applications where you have an image and you are able to train a deep learning model which is able to describe what is happening in that image. That, if you think about it, is an extremely non-trivial task. As a human, we tend to trivialize all these things because we are good at this stuff. I look at you and I'm like, hey, this is three dudes just talking about some geeky stuff, right? But for an algorithm to be able to do something like that is extremely non-trivial. You need to understand things at multiple levels, and the cool stuff is you're able to train models like this without explicitly teaching it how to do stuff. Machine learning was great, but there were some downsides to machine learning that AI solves. Things like machine learning needed feature engineering. You need to come up with good features that are pivotal in how good your models finally are. Deep learning is great in learning these features by itself, which enables it to solve more abstract problems like these. Right? I wouldn't say there's no hype at all or anything like that. There is certainly a lot of hype, but I think if you understand the space well, a lot of these things that are out there are well founded, and it is laying the foundation for a very strong adoption in the tech industry. And my personal belief is that it is going to shape the next few years, definitely.
I like the fact that you correctly state that deep learning is learning the feature automatically. And in fact, I brought that up because a couple of weeks ago, that question was asked: what's the difference between deep learning and machine learning? And a lot of people who simply thought that deep learning use a lot of data, but that is like a kind of a superficial way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of misunderstanding there, and also misnomers, between AI, machine learning, and deep learning. Even though in that order they're subsets of each other, people tend to also interchangeably use the AI and deep learning, me included, the words AI and deep learning. So there's a lot of confusion there around what exactly things are. But yeah.
But I think I have one last, but White Kid, we should wrap it up.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes left anyway, so.
Right. Yeah. I guess my last question is about, so for Sai, you mentioned that there's neuroscientists using a platform. And in this days, one of the more interesting topics that we always talk about is whether AI and neuroscience have anything to do with each other, like whether we can have any kind of fusion between the two fields, and does one is inspiring the others. And you're in a very interesting position to look at that issue because, for example, I will be curious whether the neuroscientist was working on image processing, which is clearly a deep learning problem, or they want to do, like simulations of spike neural network, which is clearly a neuroscience application.
Yeah.
I saw you smiling, so you probably have a lot of ideas about it. Will you tell us more about that aspects of the use case right now? Is it really we're talking about more like deep learning type of applications, but are we seeing both sides that is growing?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. There's, I think, a lot of development, not just in this space, but in a lot of other spaces, is by deriving inspirations from other fields, right? If you look at, for instance, biology itself, and from 10 years ago, if you looked at someone's PhD thesis on something that they did in biology, the most amount of machine learning that they would use would be like they would train either a linear regression, or if they were super technical, they would have trained an SVM, and they would have spent a lot of time doing something like this. And whereas today you're seeing a lot of these people incorporating really cool, complicated, machine learning and deep learning research into their work, right? And obviously, this is co-inspiration, deriving inspiration from one another. It depends on accessibility. It depends on how easily the information is available out there, right? And the inspiration goes both ways, right? A lot of, obviously, the basis of neural networks is derived from neurons, which comes from biology, and a lot of higher level applications of deep learning are also now applied back in different biological applications, right? And I think there's two things here, the way I see it. One is the core development of new types of algorithms themselves. What I mean is code development in the technology itself, not applications of it, code development. That we could definitely use a lot of inspiration from other fields. There is new classes of algorithms. For instance, I'll tell you a classic problem, right? Deep learning algorithms have this problem called catastrophic forgetting, meaning as a human, you touch a fire once, you realize it's hot and you shouldn't do it again. If you built a bot that used deep learning to do this, it would burn itself down 1,000 times before it learned not to touch something that's hot, right? Because again, we all know deep learning requires a large amount of data, and it forgets things easily. It needs to see patterns, right? But as humans, we are really good at stuff like that. Now, how can we derive inspiration from this to come up with better algorithms that are able to learn from a small set of features and generalize this, right? There's also the concept of, we talk about AI. There's also AGI, artificial general intelligence, perform tasks that are more general. How about instead of training a network that only recognizes cats versus dogs to something that can move to a more general task, right? Humans are great at stuff like that. Now, this is something where we could take a lot of inspiration. I mean, it is happening right now. It's just to be seen how this manifests, right? How can we use stuff like that? So there's a lot of unsolved problems. Like I mentioned initially, we're still in the ice ages of AI, right? And it's fantastic that this is such a strong open community around this. There is so much collaboration going on, and like the tools are getting better, hardware, software, and we would like to think that we're a small part in helping this revolution happen. Increase its adoption, make it easier for beginners. We're right by the street and there's an ambulance coming.
You're definitely in Soma.
The cocktail effect that would separate the siren and your voice. Yes. Aside, I personally feel very impressed. I demand you to give me 10 instances and then 100 hours of training time for free. That is my demand. But I really love the service. But we should hand it back to you.
Yeah, no, we're up at the hour. I don't want to take Sai has been super generous with his time, so I don't want to take any more of the time. Sai, maybe as a closer, anything you'd like to share with the group? And I can't remember if you still have the free hours. It might be, I think there are a lot of people in the group already, using you guys, and certainly we'd love to, kind of spread the word for you guys. If you guys have some free hours for people to try it out, so I'll hand it to you.
So we have had to reduce earlier we used to offer 100 free hours for anyone that signed up, because we were genuinely interested in people doing cool stuff with AI. The internet is not a very honest place to offer free things, to be honest. So we've had a lot of other issues, Bitcoin miners, people, freeloaders, taking advantage of that. And, we've had to reduce the number of free hours, but we still hope we are definitely cheaper than most AI solutions out there. And I don't necessarily want cost to be the only factor why people use us. We are building a lot of other technology, tools, technology, services, which are useful when it comes to doing right. So that aside, when it comes to saying what I can for users, the best way to learn any sort of deep learning in AI is to actually go and do stuff, right? So do something, right? Clone a project. A lot of us see, myself included, we see a cool tweet on Twitter about like this cool new deep learning paper, and then we look at it and we're like, oh, I'm going to try it this weekend, but that weekend never comes, right? So what I would encourage is like go do stuff, right? If you think Floyd Hub is convenient, use Floyd Hub. It doesn't matter, run it on your own laptop, but try out stuff and blog about them. Right? Writing about stuff is a great way to understand and also increasing your own visibility to the community. We are going to be soon launching an effort around curating knowledge around deep learning. So if you think you have some cool things that you'd like to talk about, reach out to me, and would love to talk to you about stuff. But yeah, do stuff, write about it, and yeah, happy AI.
Cool. Well, Sai, thanks so much again. You've been very generous with your time and your insight. This is really cool stuff. Much needed in the ecosystem. So hope somewhere down the future you'll come back and visit us again and tell us about all the latest and greatest improvements.
Cool. It was great talking to you both, Wakid and Arthur. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.